Hello everyone, my name is Aaron. So my topic today will be dealing with the legalization of microdosing with say psilocybin and psychedelics. A major claim, microdosing with psychedelics, psilocybin and lysergic acid ethylamide has potential medical benefits in dealing with mental and behavioral disorders. So I'm going to go off with a little history, definitions definitely, and I will be talking about how MRI tests and MEG testing shows how what part of the brain is affected, what is microdosing, and how it's been researched to help with psychiatric disorders, help with addiction and alcoholism. So a little history, during the 1950s, between the 1950s and 1970s, the US government was funding and allowing research with these molecules to deal with a bunch of different things during the time. A Swiss chemist by the name of Albert Hofmann first synthesized lysergic acid ethylamide in 1938 and synthesized psilocybin in 1958. But then it got leaked and created this kind of, or added on to the revolution of the 1960s. And it was banned by Richard Nixon, scheduled under Schedule I drug under the Controlled Substance Act. And up until the 90s, a second revival research has been going on. So now I'm going to my first claim on how it affects the brain. Some definitions here: microdosing, MRI testing. If none of you are familiar with that, it tests or it looks into particularly the brain or other organs of the body past the bone structure. So you'll see like a map of your organs through this imaging, and MEG testing through magnetic radio waves and magnetic field kind of charts the blood flow that goes to your brain. So this area, when the neuroscientist Reuben Carhart Harris did this research using microdosing, minimal dosages of psilocybin and LSD, and what he found was that blood flow decreased dramatically in this area called default mode network. And what this area is, it basically is the brain of your brain. So it controls a lot of your nerves that come from your brain. It connects these sensory, visual, auditory, emotional places in your brain to the middleman between those areas. So once this chemical or molecule, psilocybin or LSD, hits your brain, it kind of eliminates that for a bit temporarily, causing you to be very open. Another researcher from Yale named Judson Brewer did the same MRI test, MEG testing, but on meditators, people who meditated, and found the same effect going on in that part of the brain. Going on to my secondary claim is what is microdosing? Basically, small doses of this chemical that don't produce hallucinogenic effects, but we're all used to hearing from these chemicals. So 10 to 20 milligrams, micrograms, are given to a patient that is either being treated for depression or, and all of this is still being researched right now. This study it's called Psychedelics and Mental Health, the population study, found that mental disorders aren't these psychedelics aren't a factor to mental disorders. They did tests on people who have been doing it, using it over a lifetime, and they haven't found any connection from the psychedelics and mental disorders. And also the National Institute on Drug Abuse has done studies on Native Americans who use psilocybin. I forgot to mention psilocybin is a chemical found in magic mushrooms. So these Native Americans haven't produced any signs of mental disorders over this regular use of this psychedelic. So this gentleman by the name of Patrick Metz, he's a cancer patient, terminally ill cancer patient, and he was suffering from anxiety because he didn't want to accept the fact that he was going to die. He was getting into a depression. So he found this study called the Hopkins study that he participated in, and throughout a two-session therapy, they concluded that he and his wife concluded that he felt a lot better. He accepted death that was coming. He connected back to his world, to the people that he had disassociated with because of his anxiety of death. So with all these things, how it affects the brain, what microdosing is essentially not just to get off, it's just a small dosage, and I didn't even go to addiction. Quickly going into addiction, there was a study done called the Hopkins study. It was reported in the Journal of Psychopharmacology and conducted by Roland Gritz, who is a behaviorist and is one of the nation's leading drug addiction research. They did a small study on 15 cigarette smokers. They gave them 2 sessions of this therapy on specifically lysergic acid diethylamide, and well, both actually, and psilocybin, and 12 of them stopped cigarette smoking, and they were being checked on for a period of 6 months, and within those 6 months they completely stopped. After that, they haven't, I didn't find research on if they continued or they completely stopped from then on. And there was another study done on alcoholism too, but I am done. And yeah, there is potential medical benefit in dealing with mental disorders that we can use. Therapeutic sessions, controlled sessions with microdosing with psychedelics.
Wait, Aaron, the way the speech is organized and presented, it sounds more like an informative speech about how this approach might work than it does an argument. I think you need to explain a little bit more about what the controversy on this is and why people have resisted this or why it has been prohibited, and then make the inference that it has substantial benefits. Everything that you're talking about, all of your secondary points are phrased like questions instead of declarative sentences. You need to be making an inference on those particular points. The clearest line that you had that was closest to making an argument was the last line that you had. And I thought that if you had started with that line, everything else would have followed a lot more easily. And I don't know for sure. So when I make this criticism, I'm speaking just from my perception here. My guess is it's pronounced microdosing, because it's microdosing. You know, you like a small dosage, and when you say dowsing, it sounds to me like they're looking for water. You know, so so it's just one of those things that goes on there. So when I say it, I'm going to say it dosing. Okay, you should say microdosing using hallucinogenics like LSD and the other one can have benefits to mental health treatment or something like that. There's a claim. That's close to the claim that you're making there at the end of the speech. All right, so now let's have a point that says this has largely been rejected. That's why we're having the argument. It was prohibited because people abused it. That it had negative effects in dosages that were not controlled, and so it was a field that was largely abandoned without having done adequate research in it. Recent research shows promise of producing desirable outcomes, and here's the evidence that shows those particular points. And finally, additional research would produce, is likely to produce a variety of applications of microdosing in safe levels that would make it worth pursuing, something like that. So I think you've got information in the speech that would make this an argument, but the way you keep phrasing it, it just sounds like you're explaining what the whole history of this is, and a little bit here and there where there's some potential benefit instead of making the argument that there is in fact a benefit here. And I think you need to be a little bit more forceful about those kinds of things. Like I said, the organizational issues, the problem I had is that everything's phrased as, well, how does this work, or what effect does it have on the brain? And you want declarative sentences on those kinds of things. Microdosing works much more effectively than other drugs do in treating depression. Microdosing is the most promising addiction treatment that is currently being researched. You know, claims like that, so that we know what the argument is. The other thing is that you are paraphrasing evidence all over the place. You're basically kind of telling us, well, here's what I've read, here's what I've heard, instead of quoting directly from those sources. And I think that makes us dependent on you, that you understood it and got it right, instead of we're hearing the information from you, and we can make the inferences there and see if whether or not you've made the correct inference there. And there's a difference there between those things. You want to present the evidence as the sources that you cited presented that information, and show us what that was, and then tell us what inferences you're drawing from it. In essence, what you're doing is you're telling us what the inferences were from this based on your interpretation of what happened. And that's basically, you're making the argument inside of the evidence that you're using to support the argument. And that's a little confusing. All right? All right, thank you.